The heavy doors of St. Bernadette Hospital loomed. Scarlet felt a shiver run down her spine. It was her first night shift. Excitement warred with apprehension in her stomach. This was a fresh start, a chance to prove herself. But St. Bernadette had a reputation. Whispers of its haunted halls followed her inside. Scarlet nervously approached the nurse's station. The air hung heavy, thick with antiseptic and something else she couldn't place. A seasoned nurse, Carla, greeted her with a tired smile. Her eyes, though, held a knowing glint. "First night at St. Bernadette?" she asked, her voice low. Scarlet nodded, trying to appear brave. Carla chuckled, a dry, humourless sound. "Good luck with that." Dr. Ramirez, the resident on call, hurried past, his face drawn and pale. He gave a curt nod in their direction. Scarlet couldn't help but notice the tremor in his hand. "He's seen some things," Carla whispered, her voice barely audible. "We all have." Fear pricked at Scarlet's courage. What had she gotten herself into? As the last rays of sun faded, plunging the hospital into an unsettling twilight, Scarlet couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of curtains sent chills down her spine. St. Bernadette held its breath, waiting for something to happen. The night shift settled into an uneasy rhythm. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic beeping of machines and the hushed whispers of the nurses. Scarlet made her rounds, checking on patients, her pulse quickening with each darkened room she entered. The air grew colder as she approached room 306, the temperature dropping noticeably. A wave of unease washed over her. Mr. Salvador, the patient in that room, had been admitted for a heart condition. But the nurses whispered of his ravings, his claims of being haunted. Scarlet paused outside room 306, steeling herself to enter. A low moan came from inside, sending shivers down her spine. She pushed the door open, her hand trembling slightly. Mr. Salvador lay in bed, his eyes wide with terror, his chest heaving. "He's here!" he rasped, his voice hoarse with fear. "He's watching me!" Scarlet tried to calm him, but he just shook his head, his gaze fixed on something beyond her. "He's smiling," he whimpered. Scarlet's blood ran cold. She turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. For a fleeting moment she could have sworn she saw a dark figure reflected in the mirror across the room. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Scarlet tried to rationalize what she had seen or thought she had seen. A trick of the light? Her own imagination playing tricks on her? But the icy chill in the room, the look of pure terror in Mr. Salvador's eyes, told her otherwise. Mr. Salvador began to thrash in his bed, his cries growing more frantic. "He's coming closer!" he screamed, his voice raw with panic. "He's going to take me!" Scarlet rushed to his side, trying to restrain him. But his strength was superhuman. Suddenly the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp echoed through the hospital. The backup generator kicked in, casting the room in an eerie, flickering light. Scarlet's heart pounded against her ribs, her breath caught in her throat. Mr. Salvador went deathly still. Scarlet stared down at him, her blood turning to ice. His eyes, now completely black, stared up at her, filled with a chilling emptiness. Section 4. Darkness falls, evil rises. A low growl emanated from Mr. Salvador's throat, a sound that seemed to claw its way up from the depths of hell. His body contorted unnaturally, his bones cracking under the strain. Scarlet stumbled back, her hand instinctively reaching for the cross she wore around her neck. "He's in him," a voice whispered behind her. Scarlet whirled around to see Carla, her face ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "We have to get help!" But before Scarlet could react, Mr. Salvador, or whatever had taken possession of him, lunged. Carla screamed and threw her hands up to protect herself. The entity snarled, its black eyes burning into her soul. Scarlet knew they had to act fast. She remembered the stories, the legends surrounding St. Bernadette, stories of a dark presence, a malevolent force that refused to be silenced. Just then Dr. Ramirez burst into the room, his face grim, a vial of holy water clutched in his hand. He moved with a speed and agility that belied his age, his eyes fixed on the possessed Mr. Salvador. "Get back!" he shouted, his voice commanding. Section 5. Sanctuary in the Chapel. Dr. Ramirez wasted no time. He moved with the precision of someone who had performed this ritual before, his voice a low chant as he flicked holy water at the possessed Mr. Salvador. The entity shrieked, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the hospital. The force of the entity's rage sent Dr. Ramirez and Scarlet crashing against the wall. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Carla grabbed Scarlet's hand. "This way!" she yelled, pulling her towards the door. They sprinted down the darkened hallway, the entity's enraged screams echoing behind them. They ran until they reached the old chapel at the end of the hall. It had been deconsecrated years ago, but it was the only sanctuary they could think of. Carla fumbled with the old, heavy doors, finally managing to pull them open. They stumbled inside, the air thick with the smell of incense and decay. Dr. Ramirez joined them moments later, slamming the doors shut behind him. He quickly bolted them, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The entity pounded against the doors, its rage shaking the very foundation of the chapel. They huddled together in the darkness, listening to the entity's frustrated roars. The battle was far from over. St. Bernadette's dark secret had been unleashed, and they were trapped in a desperate fight for survival. The shadows whispered, heavy with fear and ancient sorrow. This night was far from over.